Sunday, June 30th, 2024. Welcome back to another episode of the Honeycomb podcast. We're joined by Bradley Meyer of DePIN Connection, Chris Bagnell of Blockchain Bay, and I am Joe from the Network Bits YouTube channel. This is episode number 6, and today we're going to discuss the downturn of earnings from Hivemapper and how it's been impacted by endless map improvement proposals. Would any of you like to start it off?
No.
Yeah, man, they've really nerfed the rewards. Some of the recent MIPs I think made sense, and I think some others don't. and I wonder, who's calling the shots a little bit. They say that the foundation is, but I think we're kind of in this inflection point where hopefully they can fix things, because I don't think they're doing a great job of gauging where the community sentiment is. I think they're looking at, they've mentioned in their AMAs recently, like, oh, we're not seeing any mass cancellations. We're not seeing map progress drop off significantly. But, there are a lot of leading indicators they could be looking at, in my opinion, that are a lot more indicative of the community sentiment right now. Because you think when rewards drop, people are, the first week it happens, they're like, okay, we'll see what happens next week. And after 3 to 4 weeks of that, that's when you're going to start seeing, cancellations. You're going to start seeing people no longer mapping. And then with the B, I think that's also something that's coming up. There's still a lot of people out there that I think are expecting the B to start shipping in July, just because they said Q3. They're not super connected in the Discord. They didn't watch some of the AMAs. I'm seeing a lot of people post that are still expecting a July shipment, and that's not going to start until September, best case scenario. And I don't think they're going to get full production until later this year, early next year. So there's going to be more cancellations, I think, when people start realizing that as well. But yeah, man, I mean, the rewards have really dropped off, and I'll pull up the dashboard here to show you the numbers behind it. But
Brad, I'm curious how it's in, as a fleet owner that you have a pretty substantial amount of drivers. How is this impacting you? Are you seeing drivers who maybe want to return the dash cam? They're not so confident in the project going forward. They don't think it's worth it. And have you canceled any of your large orders?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I'll start off by saying this. I mean, I'm fortunate that I have built my fleet out to where I have a lot of drivers in higher value regions. Your Chicago's, your LA's, Phoenix, parts of Florida, parts of, Texas. So while I've seen a huge hit for sure, I'm still on a volume play. I'm still doing decently well. Now, I've talked to other fleet managers that are in other regions that are less high value regions, and I know they're not seeing the same thing. I mean, they're having to take dash cams, put them in different regions, and that some of them are just selling them all together on eBay to get out of the project. I've had to become a lot more particular about the drivers I have in my fleet. So I will say it's gotten a lot more difficult to have a fleet, because before the rewards dropped so much, you could have someone that's on the road 3-4 days a week, and on a 50-50 split, it was still enough to keep the driver engaged. We've gotten to a point now where you really have to be very selective about the region you're in. You have to have drivers that are on the road 6 days a week, driving thousands of miles a week, to make it viable as a fleet manager. So they've really eliminated a large percentage of the drivers out there that were kind of like edge cases, for fleet managers. They've taken it too far. So to answer your question about whether I've canceled any orders, I have over 100 dash cams out there right now mapping, and I have, there's a recent MIP that is changing starting on July 8th, the ability to run a front and a side camera. Okay, so I think that was MIP 16, I want to say. So again, that's going into effect on July eighth. And I can't say I disagree with that MIP. I think it makes sense because they're really only focused.
MIP 7.
Is it 17? So that makes sense because
and let's clarify, it's above 40 miles per hour or
correct.
65 kilometers an hour. So if it's faster than that, side imagery won't be accepted. Otherwise, it will be accepted. And that's both in part, I believe, because number one, if you're going over those speed limits, generally speaking, you're probably on a country road, a highway, a freeway, expressway, whatever you like to call it. And that data is not particularly useful for whoever is purchasing this map data, as well as the imagery tends to become more blurry at those speeds. So, like you said, overall, I think we're in agreement that's a good improvement proposal.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, they're looking at what imagery is valuable, right? Like side imagery in an urban area or in a city where you have storefronts, et cetera, makes sense. And over certain speeds, it gets blurred, so it's not valuable anyway. So I agree with that MIP, but that doesn't change the fact that I now have a lot of work, in front of me now where I'm going to have to take a lot of dash cams most likely and place them with new drivers. There's a lot of people that are in that scenario. I'm actually editing a video right now. I'm going to post on this exact subject. But, if you're in a situation where you are, have a large B order, for example, and you were planning on deploying 2 dash cams with each of your drivers, now you're in this situation where if they were going to be doing a lot of highway mileage, you need to make a decision. I mean, are you going to be able to double the amount of drivers that you were planning on adding to your fleet, or do you cancel half your order?
That's a tremendous point you bring up. And I know that Josh also was talking in the Discord about how this improvement proposal would impact global, the global map progress score, which, look, it's a necessary overall net negative. I mean, we want to be contributing useful information, useful imagery, but I mean, we do want to speak to the impact that this will overall have on the ecosystem. So both of those tremendous points, and I'm glad you add that context as to why there are many orders being returned.
Yeah. Well, we don't know how many orders have been canceled, but I can tell you, I'm pretty well connected with the community and other fleet managers, and I do expect there's going to be a fair amount of cancellations upcoming. I mean, it's a combination of this. And let's also, I mean, we should be open about this. I mean, the whole market has had a pullback. This is pretty standard for this part of the market cycle, following the Bitcoin halving. Generally that summer following, you have consolidation and pullbacks. I mean, and Honey's seen a little bit more than other projects, but also pumped a lot harder than other projects with the Coinbase listing. So I'm not surprised to see the price action we've seen, but at the same time, I mean, the way they've crushed rewards, if you look at the dashboard, they were distributing about 6 million tokens to contributors per week back just a couple months ago. This last week, it dropped down to 2.85. I mean, they've more than cut the rewards in half. And in that same time period, they've shipped a lot of dash cams. So the pie has not only been more than cut in half, but it's being split up between more contributors now. And I think people are starting to see this massive drop off in rewards. And it's, frankly, it is very frustrating because they continue to move the goalposts. And MIP 16 is a big reason for that. So, and I covered this in one of my videos recently, but global map progress is how they decide how many Honey tokens are distributed on a weekly basis. And and it's basically, you can look at it as a group project. So it's all the different regions progress kind of piled up into one group project score, or your global progress score, and that's what determines how many Honey tokens are distributed. Well, they added a ton of new regions where there's no one mapping, and essentially they're pulling down the group project score. I mean, you think about it like this: if you're put on a group project and they're like, these 2 parts of your project are really valuable, and then you have 2 people in your project that just aren't doing shit, and aren't contributing at all. And you're like, well, screw those guys. That sucks. I mean, that's kind of what the situation we're in right now, where you have these high value regions with no progress happening, and it's pulling down the global map progress score and killing rewards right now.
And I agree with you. I want to, before we get to all of that, because this is going to be a long discussion, I wanted to ask Chris a question, because I know, as a YouTuber as well, one who sold even more dash cams than I did myself, how has it looked as far as cancellations over these past several months for you? Have you seen a lot of cancellations?
It's interesting you say that. So I actually haven't seen anything in the past couple of weeks, maybe 2 months. But when they did that transition from the HTC to the HTC or the B, I had probably 20 emails a day saying order revised or something like that. None of that affected the referral system though. But as for like new orders placed, I have not seen anything in the past couple, probably 2 months. I have not gotten an email saying that someone's placed an order. But to be fair, I also haven't been covering Hivemapper, so I don't know if that also, it definitely is impacting it, because I'm not talking about it at all. So there's no new content on it. And generally, like, I don't know anyone who's making videos on these devices themselves and telling people to buy them, just because the new ones aren't really out yet. So it's kind of hard to make content on them. We're making content on obsolete devices right now, pretty much.
Yeah. And I'll elaborate on my standpoint, but we do have a question in the audience, and I want you to confirm this, Chris. Do they ever plan to pay referral rewards? You did see some of your rewards.
Yeah, I'll be completely transparent. I got about 26,000 honey, I believe, in a payment last Thursday or 2 Thursdays ago, and that was for the very first week of their whatever their earning period was called. I forget, something. But I haven't seen anything since then. So I don't understand what that amount is from. I would have to look at the spreadsheet. I can actually do that right now and see if it adds up anywhere. But because so many people changed their orders, all of those numbers on that spreadsheet, it's like, it's out the window. I have no clue how many dash cams I actually.
That's part of it. I've seen quite a few cancellations from my part.
Yeah.
Probably, not so much these last 2 or 3 weeks, but about every other day I was getting a cancellation, and you get that email notification. It's like, is it an upgrade or is it a cancellation? And I look at, most of the time it's a cancellation. So I looked at the most recent Google Docs sheet, the spreadsheet, for those of us who are in this contest, if you like to call it that, but essentially the people who are supposed to claim these rewards once these dash cams are shipped. And I went from about 180 down to 140 in dash cams ship to be shipped.
Mm-hmm.
That's significant. That's, if we're looking at that across the board, you're thinking was that about 15%, 20% cancellation?
Yeah,
40 out of 180.
Well, wait till July hits, and then we get into August, and then September, and people aren't getting their dash cams. I mean, what's going to happen with those numbers? Other thing, and I'll say we knew what the employee and the investor unlocked schedule looked like. It's been in the tokenomics from the beginning for sure. But one thing that has drastically changed is that these MIPs are being decided on by employees, okay, the foundation. And I would argue that's a huge conflict of interest, because they're nerfing rewards to us as contributors, and it has no impact on their unlocks as employees. And if they're in charge of that, I think there's a kind of a problem there, right? So, like, looking at the math, think about this. On a weekly basis, right now, there's 19.23 million tokens being unlocked to employees every week. And investors, multiply that by 2, there's 38 million, okay, being unlocked weekly. Now, if you look at that, between those two, that's 57.6 million tokens. So we're literally, if you do the math, we're getting contributors, the thousands of contributors on a weekly basis are getting 4.75% of the weekly token mint. The other 95% every week is going to employees and investors right now. So for them to continue nerfing our rewards, and to the extent that they've done it, I think is reckless. And I think it was a complete miss on their part. And I hope that they correct it. I think, in fairness, I think Ariel has been mostly focused on getting revenue through the door and getting B in full production. I don't know how much he's been, had a hand in the MIPs. I think there's the foundation, a select few that are making those decisions. And I want Ariel to get involved and really sit down with them and discuss it, because something needs to change course and it has to happen pretty quickly, or people need to be replaced. If they can't read the community sentiment and do their job better, in my opinion. And what I think they can do that would fix things would be get our rewards on a weekly basis back up in that 5 to 6 million token range that we were at a few months ago. And also I would call for employee unlocks to be tied to global map progress, so that there's no longer a conflict of interest, because if they're making decisions that are impacting that calculation for global map progress, they should have skin in that decision as well. Okay. And I would argue that our progress is very much not just on us, it's also tied to them and their ability to execute, like getting cameras shipped. Some of these areas with 0% progress, we would have people mapping there if they could ship cameras, but they're not able to keep up with the pent up demand for mapping. And it's on them to get updates to the app that make the experience better. I mean, I spend a lot of time every week troubleshooting with my drivers to get stuff uploaded. So when they're shipping updates on the Hivemapper app that aren't working properly, why are we the only ones getting hit by that? That's not our fault. That's the team's, execution ability that is impacting their app updates. So they should be held accountable, in my opinion, and it's impacting global map progress. And as such, their token unlock should be tied to the map progress, right? I mean, we should all be in this together.
I agree.
So I that's what I'd like to see. If they can make those changes, I think they can get this thing back on track.
And I'd like to point out, for a visualization for the audience, if we look at the Flipside Crypto by Pine, this is what the weekly contributor mint amounts look like currently, and we are seeing a downtrend to, we're looking at
March of 2023 is where we're at right now. It was the last time we were at this level.
March of 2023.
Yeah,
that's when you had how many contributors on the road? 1,000, 2,000 if you're lucky.
We probably have 4 to 5 times as many now. Yeah.
There's way more than that. I mean, that's when we initially started this project. This project started in, the cam started being shipped around late December of 2022. So you talk about 3 months into the game. So you could see, this just illustrates that the improvement proposals that have taken effect are having a downtrend on the minted amount weekly, and that's why we're seeing a downtrend in rewards. And Chris, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question, I guess, for both of you guys. So just reading over the MIP 17, it says that they expect to have 2,800 regions, and if you go to their Explorer, they have 2,722. So we have about 80 to go, give or take a couple. Do you think this is kind of going to plateau with these tokens distribution, or do you think it's going to continue to go down or go up?
I think it'll get worse. I mean, look, they implemented this and they're like, well, we listened to the community. Instead of doing it in 2 weeks, we're going to do it in 4 weeks. It's like, okay. You know what I mean? Like that, to me, that was their way of saying, hey, we're going to make it seem like you guys had an input here. And we didn't really, in my opinion. But no, to answer your question, there's still another, I think, 1 or 2 weeks of regions being added where it's going to outpace the cameras they're shipping. So rewards are still, for another week or two, I would expect to go down further. Now that after that point, it'll plateau. And then if they stop messing with these MIPs, it'll slowly start to recover as they ship dash cams if people continue mapping, right?
And I can say that in my region, in my region, Chicago area, but I can't say that I'm particularly upset about my rewards looking from it, personally. Okay, I'm only making 15, 20 a week in terms of honey being at 5 cents, and I'm seeing maybe 400, 500 honey for some driving to work and running errands. Okay, that's fine if you want to look at it passively, but I'm in one of the larger regions. Is people with smaller regions, there's less of a regional rewards pool to pull from, and in many cases, especially in Europe, those are some very dense metropolitan regions that just have a much smaller amount of roadway to map there that is consistently maps. And also take into account that the gas prices are higher in many cases in Europe. So, from a standpoint, there's not a lot of active mapping going on there to begin with, but it's coming to the point where fleets in those regions, it's not the drivers. Remember, the drivers are the ones you have to convince that it's worth driving. It's worth having this camera in your dash to connect to it, download the imagery, upload it consistently to make sure it's sticking on the window, your windshield's clean, you have all this different maintenance, firmware is being updated. When it stops being worth it, when they finally say, this, I would say it's probably $10 a week for them, maybe 20, 30, after it's split with their fleet manager. Sometimes these are split 3 ways. This is very detrimental to fleets. And you see the importance that they've placed on the fleets up to this point. That's really the bread and butter of Hivemapper from the purview of the Hivemapper team, because fleets do a lot of driving, but they do a lot of I don't have the word for it, but driving
management. Like,
what's that?
Management. I mean, look, it's not a passive process. Like, I spend a lot of time troubleshooting with drivers because they're having issues getting stuff downloaded and uploaded. I mean, it's not the way they nerf rewards is as if it's like a completely passive process. And the other thing that you need to think about here is, with the B, there's going to be an LTE plan that people are going to have to pay for. They're going to have to be able to at least cover the cost of that plan and then have more on top of that. Now I know they're looking to go after commercial fleets where they can, they can add features. For a business owner, you could say, oh, well, I want, if there's an accident, I want to have the ability to have footage of that, for to cover myself, right? Or be able to track the locations of their drivers and that sort of thing. And maybe they in the crypto might be secondary for those people, but that's not going to be 100% of their drivers. I mean, even let's say that's half of the pool, they still need to be able to incentivize people enough for it to be worth it for them to be involved in this project.
Oh, certainly.
And I get what they're saying. Like they're saying certain things like, hey, we care about the future contributors in the long term of the project. But at the same time, they haven't made any changes to their unlock schedule. By comparison, like GeoNet, okay, very bullish on that project. Their token unlocks for employees are tied to milestones that they have to hit. Demo just came out and announced this week that they've extended out their token unlock period for employees and investors. Okay, so to me, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing, to actually show it with your token distribution in your pocket. And I would like to see Hivemapper follow suit there, because talk is cheap. And at this point, with the changes they made to our rewards, their word is holding a lot less weight than it did even a couple months ago, in my opinion.
Totally agree on all the points you made there. I would like to elaborate on the one last comment, maybe the saving grace for those who are in the smaller regions that I elaborated on. There's different regional boundaries in Europe. Now, there's map defined global regions that have nothing to do with Hivemapper. I assume on the nuts 3 level. So I assume they have nuts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which describes what regions are. So there's a post from Gabe in April 10th, 2024. Better region boundaries are coming to Europe. Since launch, Hivemapper has defined European regions at the nuts 3 level, which has resulted in tiny little regions that result in many smaller transactions instead of a few larger ones. It makes the Explore map confusing and doesn't line up well with how customers buy map data either. There is work underway to withdraw boundaries at the nuts 2 level, which will result in fewer larger regions. After updating the countries that utilize nuts classification, we will likely revisit the boundaries for any other parts of the world that have small fragmented regions. And this is something that I generally agree with. I like to see the larger regions because it's a larger pool. Where, let's say, here in Chicago, if we do a lot of driving around the, where I'm at here is the very edge of the boundary, all the way out in the suburbs. If I go down the roads, I'm mapping cornfields. But if I'm mapping throughout that region, I'm still drawn from that large pot. And in the area I'm at, since I'm on the edge, not a lot of the roads are mapped more than once, twice a week. So I'm getting a much larger percentage point that is really the sum of your hex points that you add up by mapping. If I'm explaining this right, if I'm not explaining this right, guys, if this don't make sense, let me know in the comments. Anyways, if let's say we were to have 7, 8, 9, 10 smaller regions in Chicago for all the suburbs, those would all be much smaller pools. And when I map inside each one of them, I'd be getting a payout for each one, but it'd be much smaller on scale overall. So in a sense, I like this because we were seeing a lot of those smaller regions really not fare well in rewards. People who are providing what I believe is valuable data in these suburban regions were really not getting a significant share of the pot. That's my thought overall. But one of the other issues I take with this is there have been some large blanketed regions for basically whole countries at this point, where you have 2, 3, 4 mappers, and that reduces the global rewards pool because of the global map progress score being lagged by a few stragglers. And we're talking about some of the regions that they added surpassed Chicago, Houston, Texas. The regions that they mapped out ended up being a large percentage of the global regional pool, that you only have 3, 4 mappers in some of these regions, maybe 10 or 11, but the progress score, because 2 years into this almost, and you have seven mappers in that region, that score isn't progressing, but it is such a significant sharehold of the overall global mapping index, the cumulative amount of roads. It is completely killing rewards, and I do not understand how that made sense to do. That totally sandbagged the rewards, as we'll present again. Rewards are atrocious right now. We're looking at the top left chart. These are the weekly mint amounts. We're back down to where we started.
Yeah. It's getting crushed. And think about it, it's going to get worse the next couple of weeks as they continue to add the rest of those regions. Go to the regions on the Hivemapper Explorer also, so we can kind of illustrate what you're talking about a little bit. Because some of these regions they've added, like Brazil, for example, I mean, and then sorted by the weight. And yes, Jonathan asked have I blinked yet? Yeah, I've blinked. I'll blink extra just for you.
Yeah. This is completely different than what we've seen.
Yeah, but look at this. So look at Brazil, right? That Brazil region right there, 0.67%. This is the second most heavily weighted region, 0% progress. So that's what I'm talking about. That's like, you're in a group project and they're like, hey, a huge portion of your grade is based on, this region, and no one, and that person in your group's just not doing any work, and it's going to pull down our grade. That's why our rewards are getting crushed. It's because we keep adding. What's that?
There's not enough people in your class to do all the work. So you're just going to get screwed and taken out on a large portion of it. And good luck.
So is this one person in Brazil getting all of the honey tokens for that region because there's no other?
Now, I don't believe it necessarily works like that. They are getting a disproportional payout. They are raking it in. But from what I understand, for their payouts to be of significance, they have to surpass, I think it's 20 in progress. Yeah. Just for them to get like what we consider a full 1x payout. They have to be past something like 20% progress. I could be wrong on that. That may have changed, but I don't believe that, until they hit a certain milestone, they wouldn't be getting something like, let's say, what, the Texas remainder region, they wouldn't be getting a proportional payout as to what that would be as far as a 1x multiplier, because there's actually a lot of work going on in the Texas remainder region.
Yeah. So sorted by the multiplier.
Let's be frank here. The contributors. Let's talk about the contributors. The contributors are people who've driven through that area. That does not mean that they are consistent contributors.
Yeah, that's true too. Here's the deal. If you're
small, have the highest multipliers.
Yeah, look at the multipliers. So if you're looking to build out a fleet, okay, what you want to do is look at the regions with the multipliers and the higher weight. If you can get a combination of a higher weight and a good multiplier, those are the regions you want to target. I mean, like I said, fortunately for me, I have a lot of drivers in those specific regions, and while my rewards have taken a hit, I have to say, like, I'm not like super upset overall. I think what I'm concerned about, though, is in talking to other fleet managers in other regions and other mappers in other regions, they're getting really screwed right now, and the sentiment has shifted a lot. So I think they really, really need to get that regional progress calculation and subsequently the global progress back up again. And I don't know how they're going to do it, but they need to do something about it for sure.
Suburban Crypto writes a comment. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. One thing that Ariel likes to say is fresher map. If that's the case, why did they take away the unmapped road rewards? First time map them soon. With his logic, Google could have a fresher map than Hivemapper.
Yeah, I saw Suburban and I talked pretty often. We're both pretty big on Demo, and he went back with Ariel on this on Twitter or X, whatever. So Ariel's stance on this is that the unmapped bonus was causing people to actively map. So, for those of you that don't know, like, active mapping would be that you are driving a road or going out to drive for the sole purpose of mapping for Hivemapper. Passive would be, okay, you're already going to be driving, so you stick this thing in your windshield and collect data. His viewpoint was it was incentivizing people to actively map and go map roads for the sole purpose of Hivemapper, and that is not sustainable long term, is his point, and that he really wants people to be passively mapping so you have consistent data over and over and over again. And for the long-term viability of the project, that makes sense. And I do agree. And he did say that if there's areas we need mapped, there are honey bursts that you can utilize for that purpose. So I get that.
Look, I get his arguments on why he doesn't like active mapping, and he's seen active mapping in the past and catastrophically. Point stipulated, like, that makes sense. But the first time map rewards, that doesn't have a lot of runway. For first time map, there's only so much first time map you can do until it's all been exhausted. Unless you live in, let's say you live in a third world country where the amount that you're making is substantial based on the 1 honey per kilometer. Okay, you'll continue to map until the whole country's mapped. Then you finally have a complete map.
Mm-hmm.
You have a complete map. That's a big deal. As touted over and over through the Twitters by certain of the Hivemapper staff, we have 20 billion unique kilometers mapped.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that's what we're going for here, a complete map. We're going for a complete map as indicated by all the many regions that they've created. Now, I always look at the worst of intentions from any team because we're in the crypto space. Most of them are scumbags. Not saying that's the case with Hivemapper, but there's no more benefit of the doubt for anyone in this space, at least from me. Sorry in advance. But I would speculate that it's because they were having to pay out of the Hivemapper Foundation wallet for the first time map, and it was costing them a lot because everyone was pursuing those rewards.
You're getting a lot of active people.
That's what I would speculate.
It could be. It could also be that it might have been a manual process for them to calculate that out too. I'm not sure if that was automated or not. So if it was a manual process, I could understand why they get rid of it. I mean, and also in fairness, I would say, based on some of the recent AMAs, I think their focus has shifted a bit based on consumer feedback and what their customers are asking for. Ariel said that, it was fun at the beginning to say, hey, we've mapped this percentage of the world's roads. He said, but, we found that over the last year and a half, our customers are really interested in a high refresh rate in certain high value regions. And we don't really care so much now about the global percentage of roads that have been mapped. We more so care about getting a high refresh rate in those high value regions, which makes sense. I mean, that's what he said. I mean, I think that resonates. That makes sense. But, to Joe's point though, like, why are some of these regions that have so much weight, are they high value regions, or are they just adding them to move rewards down? Like Gabe said, he said that he wasn't, involved at the very beginning, but that he feels that the whole world should have regions. Okay, but like, you need to balance that with your ability to ship dash cams. Right now, they've added regions, and it's greatly outpaced their ability to execute on shipping dash cams. And in my opinion, that's unfair to us. And really, they should be, if their rewards, if their unlocks were tied to these MIPs, I am very curious how heavy-handed they would be in nerfing the rewards if it was impacting them as well. We don't know the answer to that, but I would bet you that they would have modeled this shit a lot better, because I went into Discord before P16 dropped, and I said, hey, have you modeled what the rewards or what the impact on rewards is going to be? And it seemed like at that point they hadn't even modeled it yet. I would imagine if their employee unlocks were tied to the MIP, they would have modeled that shit for sure.
Yeah.
So
I want to say something that's very bold, and I don't want to word this wrong. So if you think I take it out of context, just say something or whatever. But what I've found with this project in particular, and I've been a part of GeoNet and Flawless, like, blockchain is supposed to help you automate things. The one thing this team does not know how to do is automate things. Like with the referral system, that's all manually done. It seems like the Solana congestion they use as an excuse for not being able to actually pay out rewards on time, because they're still sending out reward updates every week. It's started, it's finished. Why does it have to start and finish? It should just be like that. You take a snapshot and you have it just pushed. Am I wrong on this, or is this supposed to be fast?
I think it has to do with the processing of their system, and it's really their system. I would speculate. Now, I couldn't tell you for sure because their smart contract has not been made public, but I would speculate that their system is what takes up the majority of the processing time, and why we see in many cases that severe backlog. And we're talking about mapping data So you have to take into consideration, they're querying databases and they're ingesting this data. And, for a while they were getting a lot of bunk data there. They were getting a lot of, ones that they really had to discard or, I don't have the word for it, but the whole point being is with the amount of imagery that they were processing, not on the edge like we are now, but they'd have to process that imagery. They'd have to determine if the GPS lock was sent with that. It'd have to determine whether the imagery was good or not, or if it was, someone's dash cam fell, they mapped the floor. They had to determine how many times that hex had been mapped before, and it was taken like 100 images per hex or something crazy like that. Well, they'd have to discard X amount, and then they'd come to conclusion how many hexes was mapped by this person, how many of those were full rewards, partial rewards, have been mapped same day, and then they have a pretty extensive algorithm, so they'd have to calculate everyone who had mapped in a region and do like a comparison through that I don't want to call it algorithm, it's more of a formula, but through the formula it'd say so many people had this many points and this is how many rewards were awarded to them, and then they started paying out to wallets, and it would be their system who would push that to the blockchain, which would just really reward them tokens from the wallet. I think that is what was taking place, and that is why it took so long. Now, I believe they bulked up their servers, their processing power.
Yeah, definitely.
And they have also pushed a lot of that work to the edge, to our cameras, which is why it takes so much longer to process images and upload them. But I think that's the reason that we're now seeing a much more robust and reliable payout times.
Yeah.
There was one point where I forget what the mining was. I think it was ore mining, and the ore mining was querying the RPC servers of the Solana blockchain like 100 times a second or something absolutely insane. Like it might have been 100 times a millisecond. I don't know. It was something outrageous that caused congestion for everyone on the Solana blockchain, like absolutely everyone. I brought it to Ariel's attention. I'm like, you should have your own RPC server. Like you should have a private one so you can do what you need to do.
It's worth the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if they're planning on, especially with all the dash cams they're shipping out, they're planning on seriously overhauling everything. They should spend the extra money and get all their own stuff. But it seems like it's also the first time for a lot of them in the crypto space. So I can understand why they're hesitant to fully dive in. I know we talked about it before. It seems as if they're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They want to be professional, corporate, and also kind of dabble in the crypto space. And it's a difficult line to walk on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also part of the governance is, I hate to say it, but governance in crypto is very hard to get right. It's very much like our system of governments in the United States and everywhere else in the world that has a democracy, a republic, whatever you like to call it. It's 90% of the people, 90% of the time, the people aren't paying attention. They don't care. They don't understand the issues, and they're not engaged. 10% of the time, they're kicking over the table and voting with their feet. And it is the kitchen table issues, particularly what impacts their wallet. And they're only going to vote for what impacts their wallet positively, not what is in the best interest for the entirety of the population. So it makes it very extremely hard to come up with a governance system, especially here in crypto. People don't pay attention to elections. How many of these people you think are paying attention here in crypto? And our good buddy Jesus made a tremendous point to me when I was talking to him last night. By the way, he'd like to remind everyone that he sold 150,000 honey tokens at 35 cents.
Yeah, good for him.
So, but he said it's very hard to align long-term business incentives with this whole crowd of people who just want to get rich quick. That's the culture of crypto, unfortunately. And back to the governance system, I think Hivemapper could have a tremendous governance system. If you look at so many of the projects that we've seen before, they want to talk about staking, and they want to talk about who is earned and who owns hardware and who's purchased tokens versus mined tokens. You don't have that. You don't need to rely on the basic metrics with Hivemapper.
Yeah.
You have metrics tied to the wallets that are that hold weight as far as contribution in the system. So first time map, overall mapped, AI trainers. You could reward people NFTs for participating in governance discussions if you wanted to. You could say, we know that certain wallets are fleet owners. We can see how much certain wallets have earned and make all that a cumulative score, which then allows the main contributors, not just people who have bought tokens, not just people who own massive amounts of hardware, but people who have skin in the game, regardless if it's AI trainers, if it's contributors, fleet owners, etc. All that comes to a weighted score, and that is your weight for voting when you vote. I believe that could be implemented, but I don't believe there is any incentive in doing so, because why would you cede power? Why would you give away power when you have it all already?
Yeah, I hear you. I agree. And they've said this before. They're like, look, if we put this up to a vote, people are just going to vote to get better rewards. And there's definitely truth to that. But I don't think what we're asking for is outlandish by any means. You look at the honey distribution. If you look at the tokenomics of this project, actually, if we had 100% global progress, it would still take 10 years to distribute all the contributor tokens. That's if we are at 100% progress. And what we're asking for here is to get back to where we were a few months ago. And that's if we are at 6 million tokens again per week, that would still be only 10% of the weekly mint. That would still be 90% going to employees and investors for the rest of this year. And then, investors will be fully vested by the end of this year. But I don't think that we're asking for anything crazy. I mean, that still gives them well over 10 years, probably 14 to 15 years of runway with contributor tokens. And at that point, if this project's still going, there would have to be people buying enough data that they can, change the MIP that went to token burns to where the revenue generated can be redistributed in the form of tokens. So they won't be fully relying on these, 4 billion tokens for contribution. So I think we're just asking for them to stop being so freaking stingy with the rewards and killing our rewards, and to align their unlocks with the global map progress. And our rewards are tied to that. There should be too. All of our rewards, it's a decentralized project, should be tied to the success of the project. They're just as responsible for that as we are on their execution. And as such, I think that both of our tokens distribution should be tied to the success of the project. To me, that seems fair. These
large bars that we're seeing here, these are this is that weekly mint for contributors plus weekly mint for the employee tranches. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, where are you seeing that? Let me look at
the tall bars.
No, so that is the operational. What is that? That I think that's the percentage that was going to. So there's a weekly mint that goes to mappers and goes to the people that are doing the QA or the map training, and then there's the percentage that goes to like the servers or whatever. So they decrease the amount that's going to operational. That's not so the employee token unlocks. There's 2 billion tokens, 20% that's going over. It's a 2-year vesting cycle. So literally, you can take 2 billion tokens and divide by 104 for the amount of weeks over 2 years, and that'll get you 19.23 million tokens on a weekly basis. That it vests on a monthly basis, but that breaks it down per week. You have the same 20% or 2 billion tokens going to invest. What's that?
You say that number again?
Yeah, 19.23 million tokens are unlocking over a 2-year period, ending at the end of 2025 to investors. 19.23 million tokens per week.
And last week, the global payout for contributors, that's both AI trainers and mappers, was 2.85 million.
That's my point.
Very stark contrast here.
That's my point.
I mean, we get 40% of the pot.
I got a question for you guys, and well, I don't know. Does this chart show the honey bonus that everyone, when they bought the dash cam, pretty much guaranteed like anywhere from I think 2,500 to 4,000 or 5,000 honey tokens? Is that included on this chart or on any of these charts?
No, I don't think so, because I believe that's coming from the foundation rewards, or it's coming from a different pot.
Okay, so I'm wondering if they are. This brings up the point that Alan made, or Alan. Do you guys think they manipulated the price to get down by giving crazy rewards for those who bought the camera in December, making price low their service would be more affordable? What if they underestimated how many people are going to take advantage of these honey rewards, and then in turn they're like, all right, let's figure out a way to kind of adjust this so that we can keep giving people rewards but a lot less. Let's add 2,800 or however many regions there are, and it'll decrease it for everyone else, but then everyone that purchases will get their honey tokens, and it will all even out in the end.
I'm trying to understand what Alan is getting at here, as giving crazy rewards for those who bought their cameras in December and January. Is he saying that they offset the price by giving that amount, by giving that, what it was, a 2,500?
It went up to 4,000.
Yeah,
went up for 4,000 for the B.
And I think they just sent out a post or an email saying if you still want to upgrade, we'll still honor it, and it's like 4,000 or 6,000 now. They just
I think that there may have been some people behind that incentive that may or no longer be at Hivemapper. And I think it was a little bit of a perfect storm. I mean, they had the Coinbase listing happen. Anytime there's a Coinbase listing, generally speaking, the price pumps. I mean, the same thing happened with Demo. We see this time and time again, right? Where it gets a major exchange listing like that, and it's easy for people to purchase the token. I think it was a little bit of a perfect storm where, the token listing happened and they offered that. Like, it wasn't that long ago, like back in September, October of 2023, where they literally couldn't give cameras away. People were not buying dash cams. It was really that November, December is when that huge rush happened. They offered that bonus to incentivize people. And I think the token price pumped, and I believe they had way more orders than they were expecting, that they ever expected to happen. And the fact that they continued it in January was just mind-boggling to me. I don't know why they did that, but I would imagine that whoever had a hand in that may no longer be at the company, because they had some
people who were separated from the company.
Yeah, that's speculation. I don't know that for a fact, but that was a miss, I think, on their part to drive that many pre-orders.
I have to say, going back to, I'm no longer giving anyone in the crypto space the benefit of the doubt. There are no conspiracies and there are no coincidences.
Yeah. Somebody said it took you all of 18 months to realize the token distribution is unfair for contributors. Before I get into any project, I read through the tokenomics. I mean, I was very aware of this before I even got my dash cams when I put in my pre-orders. So it was not a shock by any means to me. What's been surprising to me is the way they've incorporated these MIPs, the most recent MIPs, how much they've really dropped rewards. And I don't think that they modeled them very well. I can't imagine that their intention was to drop your rewards as much as they have. If that was their intention, then someone needs to have a discussion with the people that made that decision, because it was a horrible decision. I mean, it was a complete miss on execution, in my opinion. And here's the problem they face, y'all. Like, they are scaling up to manufacture 200,000 bees a year. I mean, that's what Ariel said in our interview, right? What happens if they're investing all this money to scale up production? They don't have people buying these dash cams. So, what I would like to see them do is try to be a little bit more proactive and less reactionary, because we've seen this time and time again where they'll put out MIPs late, after we see in this case, let's say we see a ton of cancellations, watch them, all of a sudden change course, after the fact. I would like to see them be a little bit more proactive and a little bit more engaged with the community and connected with the community to get ahead of this stuff before it becomes detrimental to where their, hand is forced. And I've been trying to, caution them in Discord, and I've been trying to get in their ear about this. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm like, well, let's go on a live stream and talk about it, because something's got to shift. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean,
I've said the same thing to them as well. I've given fair warning. I believe was it MIP 6 or MIP 7 that I had the absolute meltdown, and I called you, Brad, and I was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, really? And I've heard for so long where it's, where we want to learn from the mistakes of helium. And that has been the standard line from employees that I've heard. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see the same mistakes, and I've heard it from so many in the audience. And, I hate to say it, but I hate when people with ignorant opinions are right, because I've heard so many people blurt out without knowing a single thing about the Hivemapper other than you need to buy a dash cam. Sounds like helium all over.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think this team's doing. I mean, and I told him, was it MIP 6 or MIP 7? I don't know. I think it was MIP 7. Said, this looks like you're about to create a helium effect. And we had, at least we had several months there with helium in 2021 where it was, what would you say, May through November, you at least were,
money
you weren't
printer.
really pissed off about your earnings. You were still happy to be making something.
Yeah.
And then it was downhill after there. But look, that was a long enough time. What do we get with Hivemapper here? We had
We had a couple good months.
Yeah. Well, look, here's the thing.
A couple.
Suburban Crypto asked this, said, if you were to give someone advice right now, would you suggest buying a cam or the token, blah, blah, blah. We can't give financial advice. Okay. But I'll say this much. My experience is that, it took a lot of work, obviously, to get my fleet to where it is. I can't say I'm unhappy with my fleet. Okay. Like, we're not this guy, I don't really like to talk about my earnings, but I guess I'll speak to it, because I think it's important. People probably want to know what the potential is if you're a fleet manager. So, I have over 100 dash cams out there. I've built in regions that, again, have high value regions with drivers that are on the road a lot. And my 50% take is, anywhere roughly 40,000 honey tokens a week, sometimes more. So it's still a good, you can still be really good if you're a fleet manager. And keep in mind, like, a lot of these regions have dropped from 3x multipliers to 2x multipliers. So, I think there's still a lot of potential here if you do it right. You have to be really strategic about it. You have to find the right drivers in the right areas. Now, as an individual contributor, it really depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to break even in 2 months, it's probably not going to happen unless you're on the road a lot. So it's going to be a case by case basis, and it's going to depend on what your goal is. But there are a lot of projects in this space that are super exciting, and I'm incredibly bullish on Demo. I personally, again, not financial advice, at the price points it's at, I've added to my position. I already have 200 vehicles connected. I actually bought more of the token this last week. I think that team is executing really, really well. And I love what they're doing with that project. I have a large position in GeoNet. I don't have any base stations. I just bought the token. There are a lot of good projects out there to focus on. But
Brad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. No, you're doing great. I'm not being a sarcastic thing, but no, you're right. We'll get to that in the next stream. So we'll start talking about some of these other projects in the next stream. We're going to be doing the DePIN Rage stream.
Those are great.
I left the link in the chat. We got a couple more minutes here. Chris, would you like to say?
Yeah, I would like to say, well, I'm glad Brad kind of touched on both points because I don't really have the fleet manager perspective, but from my personal perspective, and shout out to Steve is IT because he's kind of helped guide me when I first started getting into these things. I wanted to buy an ASIC and start mining Bitcoin. And I was looking at the cost and everything. And he's like, dude, just buy the token because you don't know whether or not this machine is going to survive a year, 2 years, 3 years. The token is going to survive longer than the device you have. So I ended up using that device and I applied it towards Caspa. I bought $200 worth of Caspa when I first heard about it because I really didn't want to spend like 5 to 10 grand on an ASIC. And now Caspa just hit an all-time high, and that $200 is worth well over $1,000. So it depends. And this is not financial advice at all. I don't want you to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy the token, but it really depends on your situation. Like Brad was saying, like you got to figure out what your goal is before you get into things. Don't just hop in, throw your credit card on the line because other people, you see a YouTuber saying to purchase it with a discount code or something like that.
I want to get to 2 more comments here before we jump over to the next stream. I believe Chris and Brad will join us on the next stream. Chats writes, it's taken you all 18 months to realize that the token distribution is totally unfair for contributors. No, as Brad said, we read the tokenomics before we get into a project. Now, I will admit the camera was given to me. I didn't buy into Hivemapper. I heard about this probably 2022, early 2022. It was all over, and it was coming from the Helium crowd.
With drones.
Yeah. Well, we heard about it before that. You know, yeah. I don't care that it was a drone business before. I like when a business enters into the blockchain space after doing all the research and development in traditional business. It's a turn on to me, a big time turn on. We'll elaborate on that in another live stream. And that's going to CMH3 Studios question. But no, I understood that. And for those 2 reasons, because I thought the token distribution was unfair and because there was too many from the shyster crowd involved, I wasn't willing to buy a camera myself. It was given to me. I came to realize after meeting the staff that it was a good project. And that's what allowed me to that's what kept me continuing through this. Yeah. CMH3 Studio writes, question for the panel. If Hivemapper did this project all over again, would they have chosen to not use blockchain/crypto? Feels like sometimes that Ariel doesn't like the token side of the project.
Well, there's no way for us to answer that question. I mean, we can tell you what we think. I think this project would be nowhere near where it's at right now without the token side of it. I know Ariel sometimes doesn't like the crypto aspect of it, but like, let's be real, without it being a DePIN project, we wouldn't have hit the milestones we've hit. So I would hope that he wouldn't. I mean, if he went a different route, I don't think it would be as successful as it is. And I like one last point before we skip over to the other one. Like someone called us fudders. Look. I think there is still a lot to like about this project. They have, revenue coming through the door. There have been token burns. We can see that. We've made a lot of progress. The B is going to make it a more passive process with more edge processing. And look, everyone, it's easy to get down on DePIN, especially because we've had this market pullback, but things get solved really quickly when you have a market rebound. And, looking at historical market cycles, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. No one has a crystal ball, but based on historical market cycles, things could definitely pick back up around election time going into early next year. And if we have a major rebound in the prices of these projects, all of a sudden a lot of these complaints are subsided. But I still think, in my opinion, what I would personally like to see from action items from the team is admit that they were too heavy-handed in these MIPs, get our regional progress scores up a little bit and revise some of this stuff to get the rewards back up, and align their token unlocks at least on the employee side to map progress in some sort of way, to remove the conflict of interest, is what I would like to see.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's pop over.
Yeah, we'll see you guys.
All right, I left a link in the description. Not description. I left a link in the comments. It will be on my channel, Network Bits. We're taking call-ins. We're going to talk more with you about Hivemapper and many other projects. XNet, Helium, GeoNet, Demo, and whatever you'd like to talk about. Thank you once again for watching the Honeycomb podcast. I'd like to say that we'll be here every other Sunday, but
we're trying.
We're trying. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. See you on the next stream.